So let's get started. I'd love to welcome Beau Boeckmann to the podium. Beau, take it away.
Thank you, John. Do you have the clicker there? Thank you, John, very much. That was actually very interesting and fascinating. I think you're so right on with so many things. Hi, my name is Beau Boeckmann. I'm president of Galpin Auto Sports and also vice president of Galpin Ford. And I think you were so correct. And I'm here to talk about a bit of how we created the Galpin brand and kind of our history. First of all, I'd like to kind of take a step back. Frank Galpin actually started Galpin Ford in 1946. And since then, we have grown to be the #1 volume Ford dealership in the world for the last 24 years in a row. And of course, we get asked all the time, how did you make this happen and how did the company develop? And obviously, it's for a lot of reasons. But today, I'd like to focus obviously on our brand and what that means, because I think you're exactly right. If you don't have a strong brand today, you really are in danger of going extinct. So when Frank Galpin, he was actually a very interesting guy. And back then, they actually used to change the car models like every year or two and keep it interesting. But everybody was always asking, what's the next car going to look like? What's the future going to be? And Frank said, I'm going to do it myself. And he actually built the first Galpin Custom in the back of Galpin Ford. It was a 1952 Ford convertible. And Mercury and Lincoln parts on it, French headlights, really cool back end. And that was the first Galpin Custom. And so we've been now galvanizing or customizing cars for 60 years. It was actually named one of the top 10 customs by Motor Trend. And what was, to me, very interesting was what Motor Trend talked about. What was different about Galpin was that we weren't there to change the design, but rather work with the design of the manufacturer to really kind of future it. And that still really holds true today. The other thing that happened in 1953 was my father, Bert Boeckmann, started at Galpin as a salesman. And I'm going to get into that a little bit later. But also, very soon after that, they hired a mechanic by the name of Ron Hornaday. Now, Ron was actually also a very talented driver. And Frank Galpin was a big fan of racing. So they started the Galpin racing team together. And they were actually extremely successful. Now, back then, you didn't have a separate racing team. When you came into the dealership, the guys that worked on the NASCAR cars were the same guys that were fixing our cars. And we entered NASCAR, and we had such a winning team, we actually took the West Coast NASCAR Championship 4 years in a row, from 1961 to 1964, with Ron Hornaday driving along with Steady Eddie Gray. And about that time, or around that time, my father was promoted into management and also promoted Ron Hornaday into management as well. So Ron Hornaday ran the service department and my dad ran the sales department. But branding without a good business sense is really a recipe for disaster. Obviously, racing's a lot of fun, but it's also very expensive. And customizing, same thing, it's very expensive. So unless you can turn it into an actual business, it's going to fail as well. And this is really where my father came in. He was never intended on getting into the car business, really came into it by mistake. And he was a lot like everybody else. He got taken advantage of when he first bought a car, a couple of times actually. But there was something very different about my dad, and really the success of Galpin came from the example that he set for all of what he set for all of the employees, how he lived his life as a salesperson for his customers and really being a servant to the customers. And then everyone that he hired and that came aboard really had to have that same character because, as I say, he's the most honest man I've ever known. He's the hardest working guy I've ever known, which is a lot of fun to work with, by the way. And he's also, most importantly, sincere. He sincerely cares about people. And like I said, is a real servant to the customer. So what was really visionary about what Dad did is he took this passion that we had in racing and NASCAR and in customizing cars and really turned that into owner loyalty and made it something that people wanted to come back to Galpin for. The first thing that kind of brought that together was actually Shelby. I was really amazed to hear Carroll Shelby. He was actually here at SEMA doing a deal with Dad, and he said, you know, if it wasn't for Bert Boeckmann and Robert and Bob Tasca, the Cobra probably wouldn't have been built. And what he meant by that is, with having the 2 dealers on each of the coasts that really supported him and wanted to sell his products, that gave Ford the confidence to then back Carroll when he wanted to go and build cars for him. So we were actually the first Shelby dealer in California. You know, just had a lot of fun back there, you know, kind of putting our racing heritage within the brand Shelby. And to the point where now we actually just got in, this was an original Galpin Shelby that was sold in 1965, and we just got it back. What was really fun is it's a true barn find. It was sitting literally in someone's garage for 40 years with the engine out of it, everything matched, and we left it completely patinaed. We have a restoration shop, but we wanted it to be able to drive but look exactly like it came out of the garage. And it's become, I think, one of my all-time favorite vehicles. And our guys did such a brilliant job. I actually drove it all the way to Monterey last year without a hitch, and it just started up perfect. And what an amazing car that really was. After NASCAR, we started sponsoring some other things like drag racing. This was the Galpin Ford Thunderbolts. We sponsored several cars like this Boss 302. We got into NHRA a little bit and sponsored, this is the Galpin Ford Maverick with Larry Fullerton. And actually Larry Fullerton went on to give Ford its first victory in NHRA. And then we also had some of the really wild ones that we sponsored. This was the Mach 4, an actual working 4-engine Mustang that had such ridiculous horsepower, I don't even know. It was built by a gentleman by the name of Gary Weckesser, who's actually here, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more later. Along with the next one that we sponsored, this was the backup pickup. Now the drivetrain on an Econoline truck was completely turned around so it would do wheelies going backwards down the track. And just really started with doing the awesome exhibition drag cars. From there, we also looked at other types of business. We used to sell only 2 4x4 trucks a year. This goes back to the 60s again. So our manager said, well, why don't we start fixing them up and, you know, the way people really want them. So this one was called the Fox Hunt. I believe it was our first off-road truck that we did, all painted up, wheels and tires lifted, you know, winches and big bumpers and all that. And we went from selling 2 a year to 25 a month, and really kind of helped launch the 4x4 truck craze in California. And then we got into doing a little bit of sponsorship and off-road racing as well. From there, you know, it was really about listening to our customers. And, you know, part of Dad's philosophy in customizing the cars, that it was really listening to what our customers wanted. And when you walked onto the lot at Galpin, you saw vehicles there that you didn't see at any other dealership, no matter what, because these were things that we created. And one of those things was actually the conversion van, which really started kind of from the surfer van craze. And it was a friend of a family member who wanted to take a van across the country, and they just got married for their honeymoon and said, can you make it into something we can kind of camp in? So they put in a couch that converted into a bed and a sink and a porta potty and a dresser, and that really became the first conversion van. And that industry really started at Galpin, where, again, we went up to selling 125 conversion vans a month. And then the 70s happened, and things really started to get goofy and fun. And this is my personal favorite, which was Madame Frenchie's, with the crushed velvet interior, chandelier, fireplace, and it's hard to see there, but a naked lady painting over the fireplace there. So it really got kind of over the top and fun. So kind of fun to help be a part of all this craziness that you see around here at SEMA. And from there were a lot of products that we innovated and were first. Heinz Proctor, who started ASC, actually was down the street from Dad, and he had the rights to the sunroof. So the very first sunroof in America was installed at Galpin Ford. And we'd also do events and themed vehicles around the events. So when we did a flower show, we would do a pink Thunderbird. We had an aquarium show, so we built a Pinto into an aquarium. And yes, that is actually an aquarium in the back of a Pinto. When we came out with a coloring book for kids, how the Pinto got its spots, we built the car to go with it. And then we do other kind of fun things like Gucci interiors, and also products that went on to be factory options. Ford actually got rid of the Mustang convertible, Dad had one built. It was on the showroom floor. The president of Ford walked in and said, "Hey, that's beautiful. Can I take that back to Detroit?" He did, and the Mustang convertible was reborn again. And then there were some really crazy things. This is the Flying Pinto called the Mizar. And this was an actual flying car in 1974. Now, we didn't do any of the aeronautical engineering or any of that, but we did have a part of the business in it, and just kind of showed how far galvanizing had really got back in the day, and some really pretty wild things, even by SEMA standards, I think. So unfortunately, that did have a tragic ending, or else you'd probably see flying Pintos everywhere today. But you know, when I grew up at Galpin, it's kind of strange to think about because you know, when I grew up on the showroom floor, custom cars were normal, and a stock car didn't look finished to me, and I didn't understand why somebody would drive a stock car. So when I took over advertising, like I said, we had been customizing cars for years, but yeah, they were getting kind of milder and milder. And I thought, why don't we use this again to kind of relaunch our brand, and also take that, build these cars, get some recognition out of it, and then we'd sell them. We also started a calendar at the time. We thought we would build these called calendar cars. And of course, oh good, I was just about to experience every speaker's nightmare, which is their presentation going blank. So do you have the slide just before that? Actually, I came to SEMA, and when I took over advertising, I came to SEMA in 2000, and I was actually a bit disappointed in what I saw. Because unlike back in the day when I was growing up and there were a lot of really cool themed vehicles, it just seemed like there was a lot of randomness, wild paint jobs and things, but things didn't really tie in. So when I came back, I said, why don't we start building some of these themed vehicles? And like I said, put them in the calendar, try to get some promotion. So I came back, and the first one we called Black Widow, and we did this spider web grille and a Black Widow interior, and slammed it down and blacked it all out, and it came out really cool. And like I said, then we went on to doing all these calendar cars, and I'll walk through some of the cars that we kind of had since we started that in 2000. We did these, actually about 20 of these tailgate party trucks, we call them, where the bed slides out and it's got a barbecue and a sink and a big screen TV and surround sound and satellite and PlayStation, so you could literally pull up to an event and have your own party going. We put a tattoo parlor in the back of a Mazda. We'd build vehicles for different guys, like a theme, like we did the Evel Knievel trucks and the Tony Hawk Mustangs. And then we did some other weird things. This was called the Coffin Cruiser. Actually had a coffin built in the back of it and a real working pipe organ. So, you know, we started getting some notoriety for building, once again, these kind of crazy cars. And as things happen, a friend of ours by the name of Al Uzielli, who was the head of Ford Global Entertainment, had been working with the guys from Pimp My Ride, the creators of it, and said, hey, you know what, you should go over to Galpin and check out what they're doing. So I met with the creators. They were really cool. And it was kind of funny because I'd say, yeah, well, we were the first one to put a fireplace in. And I go, well, guys, this was done by my dad before we were born. So, and it was kind of a great meeting. And we had a meeting of the minds because, you know, we've been doing a lot of this stuff that Pimp My Ride was now kind of recreating. So it was kind of a match made in heaven. They came back less than a month later and said, what if we shot the show here? So we took on the show. We did about 3 years, 36 episodes of it. And it was really an amazing experience. And it really helped us develop the world-class team. And it was a trial by fire. We had absolutely ridiculous deadlines. We'd have to turn a complete piece of junk into a show car in 10 days, or maybe 14 days if we were lucky. And so when we were building the team, if somebody couldn't keep up, they were gone within a day. And we really got to be polished and really great at what we did. This is the one I'm probably most proud of, a 65 Impala called the Bio Rocket that was converted with B100 biodiesel that it ran on. But the cool part is that it got 850 horsepower. We took it to the track and blew away a Lamborghini Gallardo with an old 65 Impala, so that was pretty cool. So actually, it was funny, when we took on Pimp My Ride, we hadn't even finished our showroom yet. In a lot of ways, MTV was our first customer, because we were still doing it the old Galpin way, which is building them in the back of the shop. So then we went ahead, we finished our showroom out, and then we've expanded since then. We've really tried to make it a mecca for car guys, you know, car-related gifts, and you can come in there and literally design your own car, even a hot rod from scratch, and really kind of like we say, if you can dream it, we can build it. So after we did Pimp My Ride, we wanted to kind of build an outlandish show car, because that's what we like doing. So this was called Scythe. This is actually a Mustang, believe it or not. Twin supercharged, 1,000 horsepower. You can actually drive from either seating compartment, and the steering wheel would motorize out. And we built in some vocal commands, you know, that were pretty cool for the day. Now it's just called Siri. But back then it was pretty amazing. You could actually talk to the car and it would do whatever you told it to do. And from there, we also do a lot of restorations, and in particular show cars. This is Big Daddy Ross Orbitron. Orbitron was built in the early 60s and lost in the late 60s, and people had been looking for it for 35 years. Well, it showed up. A guy found it being used as a dumpster outside of a sex shop in Juarez, Mexico. So we got it back from Mexico, and we actually put together a lot of the team that actually built the car in the first place and restored Orbitron to its glory days, and is still one of my favorite works of automotive art. And from doing that, then we started to get some pretty big clients that came to us because they wanted to use vehicles as a marketing tool. The Air Force came to us and they wanted to have a couple of vehicles to showcase technology and get kids interested in technology and what the Air Force could offer. And Mad Mike, who did a lot of the work, actually came from the Air Force, and we did this Mustang and Challenger for them. From there, Ford came to us a few years ago and said, hey, Beau, we need an idea for something at SEMA that's a little bit more engaging than just having cars out there. And I said, hey, what if we built a car like live on stage and built it from scratch in 3 days? And he said, can you do that? And I said, I have absolutely no idea. But we went back to the team, they figured out how to do it, and that's what we did about 5 years ago or so, was built this 69 Mustang, actually spread out from thousands of parts and built it live on stage, which was a lot of fun. And since then, we've continued with other types of products. This is a wide body Shelby, so we actually widen the body about 9 inches, all made out of metal, get horsepower at about 750 horsepower. We're still working on old cars. This Golf Bronco 66 is one of my favorites that we've done. This next one is on the current cover of Hot Rod magazine. It's called the Galpin Gasser 3. And then we've also taken a lot of those techniques, old school techniques, and applied them to new cars. Volkswagen came to us and they wanted a Beetle that would be more masculine than the next one. So we said, okay, cool. We chopped the top 5 inches, lowered it, slammed it, and it actually is now a pretty badass ride. And then we've had some other kind of challenging things. Ford came to us and said, we want an entire recording studio inside of a Ford Focus. And I had absolutely no idea how we were going to do that, but luckily our team figured it out. So you can actually use the interior as the booth, and then everything gets plugged in outside the car, and then the engineers in the back of the car. And it actually was used in a TV show called Gimme the Gig, and actually was an album being recorded on it. And we do actually events with Galpin. And then we have some that we've done here today. Right outside the door over here, we have the cars that we built for The Walking Dead for Hyundai. So these zombie killing machines are really cool. We did a couple of Kias in their booth. We were kind of DJ themed. The next one, you know, if you're a kid around my age, you played with Tonka trucks, and to be able to build a new Tonka truck was another dream come true. And then they're actually going to make a toy out of this truck that we created. And then I want to talk about the cars that we actually have here in our booth. We've got a booth out here by the track. We'd love to have you out and show you some of the stuff that we did. This is Gary Weckeser's 4-engine Mustang called the Mach 4. And he's actually here answering questions about it as well. And it's just an amazing engineering feat. And the backup pickup was actually completely destroyed, but we just recreated it. and it is absolutely a monster, and honestly, it's one of my favorite projects that we've ever done. And then the last two cars in our booth, we had never done a really proper hot rod. So we got together. Dave Shutton's a world-class hot rod builder. We built this 34 hot rod to compete at Autorama and take it around to shows. And I just couldn't be more proud of this. It's called Iron Orchid. And a lot of just very interesting technology and different things that are built into it. It's a period correct, which means nothing from 1965 or later is in that car. It's either custom built or it's OEM parts from that era. So it's a true period correct show hot rod. And although it didn't win the Riddler like we had hoped, it did win the most awards at Autorama and did win the Long Beach Motorama. And we're going to continue with, to compete with that car. And again, it's out here. We'd be really proud to show you. And the last car I'd like to talk about kind of brings galvanizing full circle in that 60 years. Remember, as I talked about, Frank Galpin was really about what could the future car look like. And this year we've created our very first supercar, and it's based on the Ford GT. We actually premiered it on the lawn at Pebble Beach in the concept lawn, and this thing just came out amazing. We partnered with metal crafters who did the body work. It's an all aluminum body, completely handcrafted, all custom glass work. So metal crafter does the bodies, and then we do the rest of the work. So we swapped out the superchargers for twin turbos. It'll get well over 1,000 horsepower. We've got some interesting things like carbon brakes, somewhat of a custom interior, but a lot of it carried over from the Ford GT. And this car is actually 9 inches wider than a stock Ford GT. And we're going to be producing these in extremely limited numbers for just over $1 million each, which is a crazy number to think about, but it's amazing how many $1 million supercars there are out there today. So that kind of brings us full circle, because our vision for the GTR1 was, what could the Ford GT have looked and performed like had Ford continued its evolution? So this is our vision of what the future supercar for Ford could look like. So that's a little bit of the story of Galpin and kind of how we branded ourselves. And it's, I got to say, for me as being a car guy, it's absolutely a dream come true to be able to build these cars for ourselves and for our wonderful clients and customers. So thank you, John, for everything, and thank you all for being here today.